I kind of took that attitude with me when I came into the NBA, and that did not serve me very well. I did not want to be part of showing the world a false image of America, and it was a very easy choice to make.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar hated 6 NBA players with a fury that burns even today at 78 years old. This isn't about missed shots or tough fouls. This is about betrayal, racism, and sins he believes are unforgivable. And when Kareem says he will never forgive, he means it with the weight of theology itself. At 78, Kareem stands like what he calls himself, a genuine sequoia. He's always been bigger than everybody else, observing history from a vantage point most will never reach. But while the world wants to remember him for his skyhook and championship rings, beneath that celebrated surface lies something darker, a complex structure of resentment, principle, and memory that refuses to fade with age. When Kareem converted to Islam in 1968, he absorbed a theological framework that would govern his entire existence. In Islamic doctrine, God forgives all sins with one exception. He will never forgive associating partners with him, placing false idols on the same level as the Almighty. This ultimate transgression, called shirk, became Kareem's secular compass. For him, the struggle for black dignity wasn't just important, it was sacred, and those who betrayed it committed an unforgivable sin. His rivalries weren't just about basketball. They were about judgment, about who stood with the crucial campfire of black hope and who tried to extinguish it. 6 players occupy space in Kareem's gallery of memory. Some earned his eternal contempt, others gained his respect. But understanding why requires diving deep into the racial politics of the hardwood, where every elbow, every political stance, and every public comment carried weight that transcended the game itself. The rivalry that cuts deepest, the one Kareem has never forgiven and never will, is with Wilt Chamberlain. This wasn't just 2 giants competing for basketball supremacy. This was a father figure becoming a traitor, a mentor transforming into an enemy so despised that even death couldn't soften Kareem's judgment. When young Lou Alcindor first met Wilt, the older center took him under his wing. Wilt shared his clothes, his social circles, and his wisdom about navigating the loneliness at the summit. But as Lou became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, as he embraced black power and the fight for civil rights, a canyon opened between them that would never close. The late 60s demanded a choice, and Kareem made his. He boycotted the 1968 Olympics to protest the treatment of black Americans, inviting death threats and national hatred. He stood with Muhammad Ali when Ali refused to fight in Vietnam. He became what his generation called a race man, someone who put the struggle for black dignity above personal comfort. Wilt Chamberlain made a different choice. He became a black Republican who campaigned for Richard Nixon. For Kareem, this wasn't a private political preference, it was public betrayal. Nixon represented the establishment crushing the Black Power movement, and Wilt used his massive platform to support that crushing. This was Wilt's first strike, his political apostasy. But politics alone didn't earn Wilt a spot in Kareem's permanent gallery of unforgiveness. The unforgivable breach came in 1991 when Wilt published his autobiography, A View from Above. In those pages, Wilt made generalized racial statements disparaging black women. He suggested a preference for white women and implied that black women were sexually or socially inferior. For Kareem, who had immersed himself in black history, who understood that black women were the spine of the community's survival, this was heresy. This was a validation of the white slave master's gaze, performed by the most physically dominant black man of the era. Wilt was selling out his own mothers and sisters for the applause of white audiences. This was the unforgivable sin. This was secular shirk. If you think Kareem's judgment seems harsh, consider subscribing and dropping a comment about whether athletes have a responsibility to their community, because this story gets even more intense, and understanding these conflicts helps us see how race and sports have always been inseparable in America. Kareem's rage finally exploded in 1990 when he published his own book. In a chapter titled An Open Letter to Wilt Chamberlain, decades of suppressed fury poured onto the page. Kareem wrote that the 2 championship teams Wilt played on never repeated, never showed the consistency of Kareem's Lakers. Then came the assassination. You will be remembered as a whining crybaby and a quitter, stats and all. This wasn't trash talk. This was character execution. By calling Wilt a quitter, Kareem attacked the core of Wilt's masculinity and professional identity. He even summoned Muhammad Ali's ghost to deliver another blow, quoting Ali's brutal assessment that Wilt couldn't talk, was ugly, and couldn't move. By invoking Ali, the ultimate symbol of righteous black defiance, Kareem positioned himself on the side of history and Wilt on the side of irrelevance. Even after Wilt died in 1999, Kareem never truly softened. While he acknowledged Wilt's greatness as a player in public statements, the underlying moral judgment remained carved in stone. Wilt represented a tragic figure to Kareem, a giant who possessed all the physical tools to be a king, but chose instead to be a court jester for the white establishment. In the theology of the civil rights era, there is no penance for those who aid the oppressor while standing on the shoulders of the oppressed. Kareem will never forgive Wilt Chamberlain because Wilt failed the moral test of his generation. That verdict is final. But Wilt wasn't the only player who earned Kareem's permanent contempt. Kent Benson represented a different kind of threat, the external physical danger of the Great White Hope sent to brutalize the black giant into submission. The incident with Benson in 1977 is often reduced to just a punch, but the reality reveals a collision of racial archetypes and a moment of existential survival. Kent Benson came from Indiana University, playing under Bobby Knight's authoritarian, militaristic system. As the #1 overall draft pick, he represented the Midwestern white establishment, coming to restore order to a league dominated by the aloof, Muslim, Afrocentric Abdul-Jabbar. The term Great White Hope has loaded historical meaning dating back to the Jack Johnson era, describing a white athlete whose purpose is reclaiming dominance from a black champion. On opening night of the 1977 season, barely 2 minutes into the game, Benson threw a vicious elbow into Kareem's solar plexus. The wind knocked out of him. Kareem doubled over, but something psychological happened in that moment. The NBA arena dissolved. Benson wasn't a rookie anymore. He was an assailant. Kareem's mind transported back to the streets of New York. "This was life and death for me," he recalled later. "I expected him to keep attacking me. This was the playground. This was survival." As soon as he could breathe, Kareem fired on him, delivering a roundhouse right to Benson's eye. The punch shattered Benson's jaw and broke Kareem's own hand. The aftermath was significant. Kareem was fined a record sum and missed roughly 20 games. Benson's career was permanently altered. But here's where their perspectives diverged in a revealing way. Benson speaks of forgiveness. "He hit me so hard he broke his hand," Benson said in an interview. "That gave me an opportunity to learn about forgiveness. I had forgiven him." Benson viewed it through a Christian lens of sin and absolution. Kareem viewed it through a lens of survival and control. He doesn't ask for forgiveness. Instead, he reflects on the terrifying realization of his own lethality. "I could have killed him," Kareem admitted. "That's when I realized I better control my temper at all times." For Kareem, the lesson wasn't that defending himself was wrong. The lesson was that his retaliation had to be measured because the consequences of his rage could be fatal. He viewed Benson as another white hope fresh out of college looking to make a name for himself. In Kareem's eyes, Benson was the aggressor who initiated a cycle of violence. The unforgiveness here is systemic. Kareem never forgave the league culture that allowed white players to batter him without consequence, forcing him to resort to street justice to protect his body. By the 80s, Kareem's battles evolved into great team rivalries. Against the Detroit Pistons and Boston Celtics, he encountered two distinct archetypes: Bill Laimbeer, the unforgiven thug, and Robert Parrish, the respected adversary. Laimbeer occupies a special place in Kareem's gallery of villains. He was the son of a corporate executive born into wealth, a fact that irked Kareem and many black players who saw basketball as a lifeline, not a hobby. Laimbeer's style earned the nickname Combat Basketball, even spawning a video game. His approach was antithetical to Kareem's philosophy of the beautiful game. The defining moment came in Game 6 of the 1988 NBA Finals. With the Lakers trailing and the championship on the line, Kareem launched a skyhook. A whistle blew. Laimbeer was called for a foul, a call that Pistons fans insist to this day was phantom, that the referees gifted the Lakers a championship. Kareem's stance is immovable. "Check the tape, he made contact with my body." For Kareem, Laimbeer's complaints were the whining of a bully who finally got caught. Laimbeer's entire career was built on bending the rules and endangering opponents. Unlike physical play born of size, Laimbeer's play was born of malice. He undercut players, threw elbows, instigated fights, all while protected by his status and the Bad Boys brand. Kareem has shown no interest in forgiving Laimbeer because Laimbeer represented the degradation of basketball into violence, a degradation that disproportionately harmed the bodies of the black artists who made the game beautiful. Laimbeer was privileged, protected, and violent. That combination earned him permanent contempt. But standing in stark contrast is Robert Parrish, the center of the Boston Celtics. Parrish recently made headlines with a profane dismissal of the entire Lakers organization, with 3 specific exceptions: Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Cooper, and James Worthy. Why did Kareem earn exemption from Parrish's hatred? The answer reveals everything. Parrish explicitly stated, "I respect Kareem because of what Kareem did off the court. For justice, for social justice for all." This dynamic exposes a profound truth. Parrish, a black man from the segregated South, recognized that Kareem was fighting a war that transcended basketball. While they battled fiercely on the court, Parrish being one of the few centers with the length and discipline to challenge the skyhook, there was a shared understanding of the burden of blackness in America. Kareem forgave the Celtics' rivalry in Parrish's case because Parrish was a brother in arms. Unlike Laimbeer, the privileged aggressor, or Wilt, the political sellout, Parrish was a silent warrior who respected the code. The mutual respect here serves as proof that Kareem can forgive the rival, provided the rival respects the cause. The rivalry with Larry Bird and the Boston Celtics defined the 80s NBA narrative. However, for Kareem, the conflict with Bird was less personal than sociological. It was a battle against the narratives that white America projected onto Bird. Larry Bird was reluctant to embrace the title of Great White Hope, but he couldn't escape it. The media and fans in Boston and across white America elevated Bird not just for his play, but for what he represented, a reassertion of white competence in a game that had been taken over by black athletes. The Celtics were framed as the team of intelligence, grit, and teamwork, while the Lakers were flash, athleticism, and talent. Kareem, arguably the most intelligent player in history, resented this racial coding deeply. Kareem offered a searing insight into the racial dynamics at play. He noted that his teammate Magic Johnson was beloved because Magic made white people feel comfortable with themselves. Magic's smile and effervescence allowed white fans to cheer for a black man without confronting the reality of black anger or black intellect. Kareem, by contrast, offered no such comfort. He was the angry black man, the intellectual who read history books in the locker room and refused to smile for cameras. Despite this, Kareem maintained professional respect for Bird. He recognized Bird as a fellow introvert and supreme craftsman. Unlike the unforgiveness directed at Wilt or the contempt for Laimbeer, Kareem's attitude toward Bird was detached admiration. He forgave the man, but never forgave the symbolism the media constructed around him. He understood that the Great White Hope narrative was a weapon used to diminish black achievements, and he fought against that narrative until his final game. In the twilight of his life, looking back on the centers who followed, Kareem made a conspicuous choice in designating his successor. He repeatedly bypassed Shaquille O'Neal, the most dominant physical force since Wilt, in favor of Hakeem Olajuwon. This choice reveals everything about Kareem's values and his ultimate criteria for judgment. Hakeem shares two critical traits with Kareem: the Islamic faith and reliance on technical mastery over brute force. Both men are devout Muslims. In a post-9/11 world rife with Islamophobia, this bond carries weight. Kareem has defended Muslim athletes against political attacks, creating a circle of protection that includes Hakeem. By choosing Hakeem over Shaq, Kareem is once again litigating his case against Wilt Chamberlain. Shaq and Wilt represented the overpowering style, dunking through people relying on mass. Hakeem and Kareem represented the artistic style, footwork, the dream shake, the skyhook. For Kareem, Hakeem Olajuwon is proof that his way was the right way. Hakeem won championships without being a thug like Laimbeer and without being a political sellout like Wilt. He maintained his dignity, his faith, and his dominance. There is no unforgiveness here. Instead, there is profound embrace. Hakeem Olajuwon is the only rival Kareem views without caveat. He is the spiritual heir who validated the Sequoia's existence. These 6 players, these 6 judgments, reveal the architecture of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's memory. His unforgiveness isn't bitterness, it's historical fidelity. Kareem functions as a living archive of the African-American experience in the 20th century. His refusal to forgive is a mechanism of preservation. He remembers the sting of white hope elbows when referees looked away. He remembers the betrayal of a mentor who told the world that black women were less than. He remembers the Great White Hope cheers that tried to drown out his excellence. Kareem's judgment operates on a hierarchy loosely modeled on the Islamic concept of shirk. The mortal sin, unforgivable, is betraying the race. This is Wilt Chamberlain's sin. By politically aligning with Nixon and culturally denigrating black women, Wilt associated himself with the oppressor. For this, there is no absolution. The systemic sin, unforgotten, is perpetuating violence and privilege. This is the sin of Bill Laimbeer and Kent Benson. While Benson is forgiven in a survivalist sense, the system that created him is not. Laimbeer remains condemned. The venial sin, forgivable, is being a symbol of the opposition. This applies to Larry Bird. Kareem separates the man from the racial projection, granting respect where due. The virtue embraced is standing for the cause. This is Robert Parrish and Hakeem Olajuwon. These men are embraced because they upheld the dignity of the struggle and the faith. At 78, Kareem remains active, writing on Substack, criticizing current players like LeBron James when he feels they fall short of the social responsibility inherent in their platform. He has not mellowed into a silent elder. He has sharpened into a sage. He will never forgive the forces that sought to break him. He will never forgive the erasures of history. And he will never forgive those who, having been given the gift of immense power, chose to use it for anything less than the liberation of their people. In a world that constantly asks black athletes to shut up and dribble or to smile and forgive the transgressions of the past, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's refusal to forgive is his final, most enduring skyhook, unblockable, undeniable, and looming over the game forever. His unforgiveness is not a defect of character. It is is a mechanism of memory. It is the testimony of a man who stood 7 feet 2 inches tall and refused to bend even when the weight of history pressed down from above. That is the legacy of the Sequoia. That is why he will never forgive. If this story revealed something about the intersection of race, sports, and memory that you hadn't considered before, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into basketball history. Drop a comment about which of these rivalries surprised you most, because understanding the past helps us make sense of the present.
You are my brother. Let me apologize to you if I hurt you, that we haven't been together. And God is good to bring us back together.
Magic Johnson. The name alone brings to mind greatness, championships, and that infectious smile that defined an era. But here's what they don't tell you. Some of the biggest names in basketball couldn't stand him. We're talking about legends who openly admitted they hated his guts, who refused to play with him, who held grudges for decades. This isn't about respect or healthy competition. This is about real, visceral hatred that shaped the NBA as we know it. And it all started with a smile that some saw as a weapon. Let's jump to something recent that proves this hatred never really died. Paul Pierce, the Boston Celtics legend, sat down with Magic not long ago, and things got uncomfortable fast. Magic looked Pierce dead in the eye and asked him about the 2008 Finals wheelchair incident. You know the one. Pierce got wheeled off the court looking like his career was over, only to return minutes later like nothing happened. Magic wasn't buying it then, and he still isn't buying it now. He straight up challenged Pierce on national television, asking why he faked that injury against the Lakers. Pierce has even joked about needing a bathroom break, but Magic saw it as typical Celtics theatrics. And this is where it gets interesting. Magic told Pierce something that reveals everything about how deep this rivalry runs. He said, "I really don't like you, but you're my little brother. Now I love you because you're out of that green and white." Think about that. Magic could only love Pierce after he left Boston. The Celtics' hatred ran so deep that even decades later, wearing those colors made you the enemy. But Pierce was just the modern echo of something much darker. To understand why NBA legends hated Magic Johnson, we have to go back to where it all began. Boston, not the city, the team. The Boston Celtics weren't just rivals, they were Magic's mortal enemies, and the feeling was mutual. This wasn't sports hatred, this was war. And it started before either Magic or Larry Bird ever played an NBA game. The 1979 NCAA Championship, Michigan State versus Indiana State, Magic versus Bird, the highest-rated college basketball game in history. This wasn't just a game, it was the beginning of a psychological warfare that would define the next decade. Magic won that championship, and in doing so, he established a hierarchy. He was the winner. Bird was the loser who would spend years trying to prove otherwise. But here's what made this different from normal competition. The racial and cultural dynamics turned this into something uglier. Bird was marketed as the Great White Hope, the blue-collar kid from French Lick, Indiana. Magic was the flashy, urban, predominantly black style of basketball that was taking over the sport. The Celtics and their fans saw Magic's Showtime Lakers as everything wrong with basketball. Too flashy, too Hollywood, not real basketball. Magic saw the Celtics as dinosaurs who needed to be destroyed. He later admitted something chilling. "I hated Larry and every Celtic. Not disliked, not competed against. Hated." The foundation of this hatred went deeper than just winning and losing. It represented two completely different visions for what basketball should be. The Celtics embodied traditional half-court execution. They valued defense, methodical offense, and what they called fundamental basketball. The Lakers under Magic represented revolution. Fast breaks, no-look passes, entertainment. Style and substance combined. To the Celtics faithful, this wasn't just a different approach. It was an assault on everything they believed basketball should be. And Magic was the face of that assault. He was dismantling their philosophy game by game, championship by championship. Every time Magic threw a behind-the-back pass that led to a Kareem skyhook, he was proving that basketball could be beautiful and effective. The Celtics hated him for making their style look outdated. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the real stories behind basketball's greatest rivalries, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me which rivalry was the most intense. Was it Magic and Bird, or does something else top your list? Let's debate. The hatred between Magic and the Celtics reached its peak in 1984. The finals that year became Magic's nightmare. The Lakers were favored to win, but they collapsed in 7 games. Magic made critical errors, a dribbling turnover in Game 2, missed free throws in Game 4, another turnover in Game 7. The Celtics didn't just beat him, they humiliated him, and then they gave him a new name, Tragic Johnson. Not Magic, Tragic. This wasn't trash talk. This was an attempt to destroy his identity as a winner. Magic spent that entire summer in isolation, fueled by a hatred that became all-consuming. The Celtics wanted him to suffer, and they succeeded. The psychological damage from 1984 cannot be overstated. Magic had built his entire identity around winning. He won a championship in high school. He won a championship at Michigan State as a sophomore. He won an NBA championship as a rookie, earning Finals MVP. Winning wasn't just what Magic did, it was who he was. The Celtics stripped that away. They made him question everything. His decision-making, his toughness, his ability to perform in crucial moments. The Tragic Johnson label followed him everywhere that summer. Sports columnists used it. Fans chanted it. It became his identity, whether he liked it or not. And the Celtics reveled in it. They had finally exposed the flaw in the Golden Boy. This wasn't just about basketball supremacy. This was about breaking someone's spirit. And for a few months, they succeeded. But the hatred wasn't just verbal. It became physical. Game 4 of that 1984 Finals, Kevin McHale clotheslined Kurt Rambis. This wasn't a basketball play. It was a statement. The Celtics were telling the Lakers they were soft, they were Hollywood, and the Celtics were going to hurt them. McHale later reflected on that era and said something revealing. We hated each other so much because we had the same mentality. Both teams wanted to win at all costs. Both teams saw the other as the only obstacle to greatness. But the Celtics took it further. They wanted to intimidate. They wanted to break Magic physically and mentally. And here's the thing that proves how deep this hatred ran. Decades after retirement, some Celtics still couldn't let it go. Robert Parrish, the Hall of Fame center, gave an interview where he talked about respecting Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Michael Cooper. Then he said this about the rest of the Lakers. The rest of them Lakers, forget all of them. He literally couldn't say anything positive about Magic or James Worthy. Cedric Maxwell, another Celtics champion, admitted that seeing Magic, Cooper, and Worthy still makes him angry. He said, "Them dudes still tick me off right now." This was years after they all retired. The hatred never faded. Magic had beaten them in 1985 and 1987, and they couldn't forgive him for it. Now you think eventually this hatred would cool down. And it did, but not because of basketball. It happened because of capitalism. In 1986, Converse sponsored both Magic and Bird. They wanted to film a commercial at Bird's home in French Lick, Indiana. Magic was terrified. He was going into enemy territory, but when he got there, Bird's mother served them lunch. They talked. They realized they were more alike than different. Both were introverted despite their public personas. Both were Midwest kids obsessed with winning. Both were family-oriented. Magic later said Bird made him better as a player. They became friends, but even this friendship had limits. On the court, the hatred remained. The friendship was off the court only. While Magic was battling the Celtics, another relationship was quietly falling apart. And this one hurt worse because it involved betrayal. Isaiah Thomas wasn't just Magic's friend, he was his brother. In the early 80s, they were so close that they kissed each other on the cheek before games. This kind of intimacy was unheard of in the hyper-masculine world of professional basketball. Other players found it strange, but Magic and Isaiah didn't care. They had a bond that seemed unbreakable until it broke. The fracture started in 1988 when the Lakers beat Isaiah's Detroit Pistons in the finals. The series was brutal. Isaiah played on a badly sprained ankle in Game 6, scoring 25 points in a quarter. But the Lakers won in 7 games. The friendship survived? Barely. Then 1989 happened. The Pistons swept the Lakers. Isaiah's bad boy Pistons were the most hated team in basketball. They played dirty, they hurt people, and Isaiah was their leader. Magic had to choose between his friendship with Isaiah and his loyalty to the Lakers. The friendship started to die. The 1989 sweep was particularly brutal because of how it happened. The Pistons didn't just beat the Lakers, they embarrassed them. They physically dominated them. Byron Scott was injured. Magic tried to carry the team but couldn't. The Pistons celebrated on the Lakers' home court. And Isaiah was at the center of it all, smiling and hugging his teammates while Magic watched his dynasty crumble. That image burned itself into Magic's mind. His best friend had just destroyed everything he built. The professional became personal. The line between competition and friendship blurred beyond recognition. And once that line disappeared, there was no going back to what they had before. But what killed it completely was the 1992 Dream Team. Isaiah Thomas should have been on that team. Everyone knew it. He was one of the best point guards in the world. But he got left off. For years, people blamed Michael Jordan. Jordan hated Isaiah and supposedly said if Isaiah plays, he wouldn't. But Magic's role in the exclusion is what made it unforgivable. Magic later admitted that nobody on the Dream Team wanted to play with Isaiah. Not Jordan, not Scottie Pippen, not Larry Bird, not Karl Malone, and not Magic. Magic said Isaiah killed his own chances. He prioritized team chemistry over his friendship. He even admitted that purely on ability, Isaiah deserved to be there over John Stockton. Isaiah could take over games and score 25 points in a quarter. Stockton couldn't do that, but Magic chose the group over his brother. That was the professional betrayal. The personal betrayal came after Magic announced he had HIV in November 1991. Suddenly, rumors started spreading that Magic was gay. In 1991, HIV was falsely seen as a gay disease. The rumors were vicious and damaging. Magic believed Isaiah was spreading them. He said Isiah asked his agent if Magic was gay, questioning what Magic was doing in Los Angeles. To Magic, this was the ultimate backstab. Your best friend gossiping about your sexuality while you're facing a life-threatening illness. Isiah denied it. He was hurt that Magic believed the accusation without ever confronting him directly. Isiah said whatever friendship they had was nonsense if Magic could believe that about him. They didn't speak for over 20 years. In 2017, they finally reconciled on television. Both men cried. Magic apologized for not being there for Isiah, but 2 decades of silence because of hatred and mistrust. That's the cost. While Magic's friendship with Isiah was crumbling, a new threat was emerging. Michael Jordan, the king and the prince, the aging legend and the heir apparent. This hatred was different. It wasn't about dynasties or personal betrayal, it was about territory, and it started with an alleged conspiracy. The 1985 All-Star Game. Jordan's rookie season. Allegations surfaced that Magic, Isiah Thomas, and George Gervin froze Jordan out of the game. They supposedly refused to pass him the ball to teach the cocky rookie humility. Magic and Isiah's agent later denied this, pointing out Jordan took 9 shots, more than many starters. But the perception stuck. The old guard was hostile to Jordan's rise. Magic was one of the gatekeepers trying to keep Jordan in his place. Whether it happened or not, Jordan believed it did, and he never forgot. The rivalry culminated in 1991, the finals. Jordan's Bulls destroyed Magic's Lakers in 5 games. It was a symbolic changing of the guard. Showtime was over. The Bulls' dynasty was beginning, but Magic showed grace. In the locker room after the defeat, he told Jordan, "You are the right one. You are the new king." Magic accepted his defeat. He acknowledged Jordan's superiority. The active hostility ended there. But there was one final battle, the Dream Team training camp in Monte Carlo, 1992, an inter-squad scrimmage that became legendary. Magic captained one team, Jordan the other. Magic tried to get into Jordan's head. He told him, "The Bulls aren't here now, Michael," implying Jordan couldn't rely on his usual teammates. Big mistake. Jordan took it personally. He came down the court and hit 5 straight shots. After the scrimmage, he puffed his cigar and said, "Larry and Magic, you had your run, but there's a new sheriff in town." That was the final psychological surrender. Magic and Bird both realized the league belonged to Jordan now. The hatred transformed into resignation. But the most painful hatred Magic faced didn't come from competition. It came from fear. After Magic announced his HIV diagnosis in November 1991, he tried to return for the 1992 All-Star Game. What should have been a celebration became a controversy, because some players didn't want him there. They were scared. Karl Malone became the face of that fear. His comments were blunt and brutal. He said, "Look at this, scabs and cuts all over me. I get these every night, every game. They can't tell you that you're not at risk." He questioned whether he could play as hard with Magic on the court. John Stockton supported him. Other players whispered similar concerns. Magic was devastated. He said it felt like a good friend saying they couldn't hang out anymore. The NBA fraternity was turning its back on him when he needed them most. But here's where it gets darker. Byron Scott, Magic's teammate, accused Malone of using the HEV scare strategically. Scott claimed Malone knew the Lakers had the best team with Magic. If Magic didn't play, Utah had a better shot at the finals. Scott said he couldn't believe Malone would stab Magic in the back like that. Was Malone's fear genuine or opportunistic? Either way, Magic felt betrayed by the league he helped build. The 1992 All-Star Game itself became a moment of grace. Tim Hardaway voluntarily gave up his starting spot to Magic. Magic hit a 3-pointer over Isiah Thomas and got a standing ovation. Players hugged him at mid-court. It seemed like the stigma was defeated. But the underlying fear remained strong. Magic tried to come back for the 1992-93 season, but retired again because of the controversy. Players were still scared. The hatred born of ignorance had won. Looking back at Magic's career, the hatred he faced came in many forms. The Celtics hated him because he represented the modernization of basketball. Isiah hated him because their friendship couldn't survive the pressure of championship rivalry and perceived betrayal. Jordan's generation resented him because he was the gatekeeper who had to be overthrown. Karl Malone and others feared him because his illness forced the NBA to confront mortality in a way they weren't prepared for. Magic endured all of it. He smiled through the tragic Johnson taunts. He returned to the All-Star Game despite the fear-mongering. He eventually reconciled with his fiercest enemies. The hatred wasn't a flaw in Magic's career. It was proof of his greatness. You don't get hated unless you're a threat. You don't make enemies unless you're winning. And Magic won more than most. 5 championships, 3 finals MVPs, the architect of Showtime, the man who saved the NBA alongside Larry Bird. But the cost was steep. He was isolated by his transcendence. To be Magic was to be a target, and yet he survived it all. He turned enemies into friends. He turned hatred into respect, and eventually into something much more. That's the real Magic Johnson story. Not just the smile and the championships, but the battles he fought against people who wanted to see him fail, and how he won anyway. Before we wrap up, if this video gave you a new perspective on Magic's career, make sure you're subscribed. And drop a comment with your biggest takeaway. Did any of these rivalries surprise you? Let me know. The hatred was real, the battles were brutal, but Magic's legacy endured. That's greatness. Bill Laimbeer thought they were all worthless. The Prince of Darkness, his heinous, Counterfeit Bill. These weren't just nicknames. They were badges of honor for the most hated man in basketball. Bill Laimbeer didn't just play the villain role. He created it, perfected it, and turned it into championship gold. While other players wanted to be loved, Laimbeer wanted to be feared, and he succeeded beyond anyone's wildest imagination. April 19th, 1990. Detroit Pistons versus Philadelphia 76ers. The game was almost over when chaos erupted. Charles Barkley and Bill Laimbeer threw punches at each other right there on the court. This wasn't a little shove or heated words. This was an all-out brawl with fists flying and bodies crashing. When the dust settled, the NBA handed down some of the heaviest fines in league history. Both Laimbeer and Barkley got slapped with a $20,000 fine and a one-game suspension. Scott Hastings got hit with $10,000 for leaving the bench. Even Isaiah Thomas paid $7,500 for his part in a separate incident that sparked the whole mess. The league wasn't playing around anymore. They were done with this kind of violence, and Bill Laimbeer was right in the middle of it all. But here's the thing about Laimbeer. He wasn't just some out-of-control thug throwing punches for fun. Everything he did was calculated. The Pistons had a defensive strategy called the Jordan Rules. After Michael Jordan dropped 59 points on Detroit in April 1988, Coach Chuck Daly sat down with his assistants and came up with a plan. They weren't going to let Jordan beat them anymore. The goal was simple: physically challenge him, vary the defenses, throw him off balance, make him work on both ends of the court, wear him out. Laimbeer was the enforcer of this system. The rule was clear. Anytime Jordan went by you, nail him. If he came off a screen, nail him. When Jordan was at the point, force him left and double team immediately. On the left wing, bring an instant double from the top. On the right wing, use a slow double. In the box, send a big player like Laimbeer to rough him up. The threat was constant. Jordan never got comfortable. He never relaxed into his usual patterns. And Jordan himself admitted the Pistons succeeded in messing with his game during the 1988 Eastern Conference semifinals. The strategy worked. Now, before we keep going, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Who do you think had the most heated rivalry with Bill Laimbeer? Was it Jordan, Bird, Barkley, or Parrish? Let me know what you think, because these feuds defined an entire era of basketball. The rivalry with Michael Jordan went beyond one playoff series. This was years of hard fouls, trash talk, and pure hatred. Laimbeer took the liberty of being incredibly physical with Jordan every single time they matched up. It wasn't personal for Laimbeer. It was business. His philosophy was crystal clear. Jordan was not going to beat us. That was the Jordan Rules. Anybody but him could score. Laimbeer would rather let any other player on the Bulls go off than give Jordan an easy night. He accepted that Jordan might average 32 points per game like he did in the 1990 series. The long-term goal was psychological attrition. Break him down mentally, make him exhausted, eventually get the victory. And the strategy had another layer. When Jordan guarded a Pistons player on offense, that player immediately passed the ball. Why? To force Jordan to work hard on both ends of the court. Laimbeer was a potent inside scorer and rebounder with high efficiency. He shot almost 50% from the field and 84% from the free throw line. That meant he provided huge offensive value while demanding very little energy from Jordan on defense. Over a long playoff series, this created an energy gap in Detroit's favor. They were grinding Jordan down possession after possession, quarter after quarter, game after game. But Michael Jordan wasn't the only superstar who despised Bill Laimbeer. Larry Bird absolutely hated him. This rivalry was intensely personal. Bird openly expressed his hatred for Laimbeer's playing style. The 1987 playoffs gave us the defining moment of their feud. During a game, tensions boiled over and Laimbeer body-slammed Bird to the floor. Both players got ejected immediately. This wasn't just Laimbeer going after a regular opponent. This was him challenging the established league hierarchy. Larry Bird was one of the most respected and revered superstars in basketball. Nobody messed with Larry Legend except Bill Laimbeer. He showed everyone that even the biggest names weren't safe from the Pistons' relentless physical mandate. Then there was Robert Parrish, the Chief, a Boston Celtics legend known for his calm demeanor and professional approach. Laimbeer pushed him past his breaking point. In Game 4 of the 1987 playoffs, Laimbeer had already racked up 4 personal fouls with his rough play. His constant use of elbows created an environment that made opponents see red. In Game 5, Parrish decided he'd had enough. When Laimbeer wasn't looking, Parrish delivered a calculated, intentional elbow right to the back of his head. Laimbeer crashed to the floor. The crowd went wild. This moment is incredibly revealing. Laimbeer spent his entire career as the primary aggressor and instigator. He was the one throwing elbows and cheap shots. But here he was, getting struck from behind by one of the most respected players in the league. That shows just how deep the frustration ran. Parrish was so fed up with Laimbeer's antics that he threw away his professional reputation for one moment of revenge. While Parrish avoided a foul call during the game, the league reviewed the tape and suspended him for Game 6. But the damage was done. Laimbeer had gotten so far under Parrish's skin that he transformed the Chief into the aggressor. All of these rivalries fit into a bigger picture. Bill Laimbeer came from an affluent background. His father was a high-ranking executive at Owens, Illinois, a Fortune 500 company. He grew up with money and privilege. He went to Palos Verdes High School in California, where he led his team to a state championship in 1975. Then he attended Notre Dame, but his college career hit a snag when he flunked out after his freshman year. He spent 2 semesters at Owens Technical College to get his grades back up before returning to Notre Dame. In 1978, he helped the Fighting Irish reach the Final Four. This background is important because it shaped how people viewed him. Fans and rivals saw his roughneck playing style as fake. They called him Counterfeit Bill because they didn't believe his toughness was real. To them, he was just a rich kid pretending to be a street fighter. That made the hatred even more intense. It wasn't just about what he did on the court, it was about who he was off it. The Cleveland Cavaliers drafted Laimbeer in the 3rd round of the 1979 NBA draft. Before his NBA debut in October 1980, he spent a season playing professionally in Italy with Basket Brescia. That experience in European basketball was crucial. European leagues traditionally allowed more intense, non-whistled contact. Playing there conditioned Laimbeer to operate at the edges of what officials would allow. When he came back to the NBA, he knew exactly how far he could push before getting called for a foul. During his time with the Cavaliers, Laimbeer appeared in 131 games. He scored 1,125 points and grabbed 970 rebounds. Those are decent numbers, but nothing special. His true potential wasn't unlocked until 1982 when he got traded to the Detroit Pistons. Under coach Chuck Daly, everything clicked. The Pistons gave him the perfect system to maximize his unique combination of skill and physicality. And here's what people forget. Laimbeer was genuinely talented. He played 14 professional seasons and appeared in 1,068 regular season games. He scored 190 career points for an average of 12.9 per game. He pulled down 10,400 rebounds for 9.7 per game. He even dished out 2,184 assists. In 1986, he led the entire NBA in rebounding. His field goal percentage was a solid 49.8%, but his free throw percentage was truly elite for a center. He shot 83.7% from the line over his entire career. That's incredible for a big man. Why does that matter? Because it made him impossible to foul late in games. Opponents couldn't use the hack-a-Shaq strategy against him. If you fouled Laimbeer hard, he just went to the line and made his free throws. He turned your aggressive play into easy points for Detroit. On top of that, he shot 32.6% from three-point range. For a center in that era, that kind of versatility was rare. The fact that Laimbeer maintained this efficiency while playing such a physical style is remarkable. He accumulated 502 personal fouls in just 2 seasons with the Cavaliers. That's an insane rate of fouling, yet he played over 1,000 games in his career without suffering the kind of devastating injuries that usually end the careers of physical players. His approach wasn't reckless, it was controlled aggression. He knew how to dish out punishment while protecting himself. Laimbeer's willingness to be the villain served a greater purpose for the Pistons. He publicly embraced the role. The team adopted an us against the world mentality. Laimbeer said if the public was going to hate them anyway, they might as well make them hate us worse by winning. This strategy created a mental effect on opponents. The physical game threw them off psychologically. It disrupted their focus and their rhythm. The Pistons won back-to-back NBA championships in 1989 and 1990. The strategy worked, but there were consequences. The extreme nature of the Pistons' play forced the league to respond. After Detroit's success, other teams like the Knicks adopted this brutal type of play. The NBA eventually implemented rule changes designed to reduce physicality, so teams would have more offensive freedom. The league clarified and intensified how officials called contact. They wanted to move away from the style of basketball the Bad Boys had perfected. Charles Barkley later reflected on his suspension for fighting with Laimbeer. He wasn't happy about the fine or the missed game, but he understood that the league needed to send a message. The violence had gone too far. The NBA was ready to move into a new era, an era where skill and athleticism mattered more than intimidation and brute force. When Laimbeer retired from the NBA, a lot of people thought that was the end of his basketball story. They figured he'd fade away into obscurity, but they were wrong. In 2002, he became the head coach of the Detroit Shock in the WNBA, and he didn't just coach, he dominated. From 2002 to 2009, he led the Shock to 3 WNBA championships in 2003, 2006, and 2008. The league named him WNBA Coach of the Year in 2003 and again in 2015. He later coached the New York Liberty from 2013 to 2017 and the Las Vegas Aces from 2018 to 2021. His coaching success proves something crucial. The foundation of Bill Laimbeer's competitive genius wasn't just physicality. It was strategic mastery, discipline, and an unyielding will to win. Modern basketball doesn't allow the kind of contact that defined the Bad Boys era. Yet Laimbeer still won championships. He still earned Coach of the Year honors. He proved his leadership abilities were transferable across different teams, different players, and different eras of the game. So before we wrap up, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because we've got more incredible basketball stories coming your way. And drop a comment about which rivalry you found most shocking. Bill Laimbeer was the essential, calculated villain the Detroit Pistons needed to win championships. His elite free throw shooting made him valuable in clutch situations. His rebounding dominance secured his position as a starting center. But it was his deliberate psychological warfare that gave the Pistons their mental advantage. He embraced the hatred, he leaned into it, and he used it to fuel 2 championship runs that changed basketball forever. His career forced the NBA to reassess how physical the game should be. The rules changed because of him. The era of sustained, unchecked contact ended because Bill Laimbeer pushed it too far. His legacy isn't just the players he fought, it's the permanent impact he had on how basketball is played today.
Oh, and there's a swing by him, and they got a Then Barkley and Laimbeer. Barkley gets in the left, so had a cut. Both benches empty. It went on for 5.
Some people see Charles Barkley and only remember the loud voice, the controversies, and the fact he never won a championship ring. They think that tells the whole story. They measure him by what he didn't win and call it a day. But to measure him by the lack of a ring is to miss the point entirely. The men who actually battled him, the greatest legends of all time, saw something different. They said they would never see anyone like him. This is Barkley's story as told by his peers and greatest adversaries. It's a story not about a trophy, but about an undeniable respect he won from the best to ever play the game. The story begins in the summer of 1984. Before Charles Barkley and Michael Jordan were global icons, they were college kids fighting for spots on the US Olympic team. It was at those tryouts that Barkley first truly encountered Jordan. Despite being one of the most dominant players at the camp, Barkley was famously cut by coach Bob Knight. He left not just with a chip on his shoulder, but with a story he would tell for decades. When Barkley returned to Auburn, he told his coach, Sonny Smith, about what he had witnessed. When asked who the best player at the tryouts was, Barkley's response was pure, honest awe. "Coach, I just saw the best basketball player I ever seen in my life. His name is Michael Jordan. He's from North Carolina. I thought I was a really good player, but I said this dude is the best I've ever seen." This moment of honest recognition coming from a player as confident as Barkley set the foundation for their entire relationship. It was built on a mutual, sometimes combative, respect for each other's supreme talent. Before we go further, think back to your own first impression of someone great. Maybe it was a teacher, a coach, or even a player like Jordan or Barkley. Drop a comment and tell us about that moment when you knew you were watching something special. As their professional careers unfolded, that respect was tested in countless battles. Jordan came to appreciate Barkley's unique brand of toughness. He humorously recalled a playoff game against Barkley's Philadelphia 76ers when, after Jordan had scored over 40 points, an angry Barkley demanded to guard him personally. Jordan saw him get into a technically perfect defensive stance and couldn't help but laugh. "When in the hell are you going to start playing defense?" Jordan joked. Though he passed the ball, Jordan recognized the essence of his rival in that moment. Barkley was the type of competitor who would take on any challenge, no matter how outmatched he might seem. It was a display of heart that Jordan, the ultimate warrior, could not help but respect. Their careers reached a dramatic peak in the 1993 NBA Finals. Barkley, now with the Phoenix Suns, was the reigning league MVP and entered the series believing he was the best player in the world. Jordan, however, used Barkley's MVP win as fuel. As he stated in the Last Dance documentary, his mindset was clear. "I was a little bit upset that I didn't get the MVP that year and they gave it to Charles Barkley. But with that said, okay fine, you can have that. I'm gonna get this." The fact that Jordan, a 2-time defending champion, felt the need to draw motivation from Barkley's individual award speaks volumes. It wasn't merely a slight. It was an acknowledgement that a legitimate challenger had arrived, one who threatened his undisputed reign over the league. The series became a humbling experience for Barkley. After the Suns lost the first 2 games at home, he shared a rare moment of vulnerability with his crying daughter. I said, hey, just relax. We're going to be fine, but I gotta tell you something. I ain't never said this in my life, but I think that guy might be better at basketball than I am. For a player as proud as Barkley, this admission was the ultimate concession, a profound acknowledgement of the greatness he was facing. It was the moment he understood that Jordan operated on a different plane. This dynamic, Jordan's intense motivation to vanquish a worthy foe, and Barkley's eventual honest admission of his rival's superiority, was not the typical relationship between a champion and a challenger. It was a dialogue between two of the game's ultimate alphas, a recognition that they were engaged in a battle for the throne itself, solidifying a bond built on the highest form of competitive respect. The historic 1984 NBA draft not only introduced Barkley and Jordan, but also brought Hakeem Olajuwon and John Stockton into the league, creating a peer group of Hall of Famers who would collectively define an era. Furthermore, Barkley and Stockton's careers began on a strikingly similar note. Both were among the final players cut from that star-studded 1984 Olympic team, sharing an early career setback that would fuel their drives to greatness. They entered the league not as Olympic heroes, but as supremely talented outsiders ready to prove their worth. Upon entering the NBA, Charles Barkley immediately became a disruptive force in a league dominated by established dynasties. As the franchise player for the Philadelphia 76ers, he didn't just put up numbers. He challenged the existing hierarchy of the Eastern Conference. His early years were a crucible, forging his reputation in the fires of battle against legends like Larry Bird and Patrick Ewing, and providing an unforgettable welcome to the league for future stars like Reggie Miller. In the 1980s, the NBA was largely defined by the rivalry between Larry Bird's Boston Celtics and Magic Johnson's Los Angeles Lakers. For a younger contemporary like Barkley to earn the respect of those titans was a significant achievement. Years later, when reflecting on the fierce, personal nature of competition in his era, Bird offered a simple yet powerful endorsement that placed Barkley in the most elite company. "I love to compete against Michael and Charles," Bird stated, seamlessly including Barkley alongside his own generation's defining rival. This respect was earned through intense on-court clashes. The era was characterized by physical play and sharp-witted trash talk, and Barkley was a master of both. He once famously quipped about Bird's defensive limitations, joking, "As long as Bird's around, I'll only be the second worst defensive player in basketball." This was not a sign of disrespect, but rather a hallmark of the competitive banter that defined the league's toughest rivalries. Beneath the verbal jabs was a clear acknowledgement of a worthy opponent. Bird's inclusion of Barkley in his short list of favorite competitors serves as a definitive statement of the esteem in which he held the round mound of rebound. As one of the most physically imposing centers of his generation, Patrick Ewing had a unique vantage point from which to assess Barkley's improbable dominance. The New York Knicks legend, a true 7-footer, marveled at how Barkley, generously listed at 6'6", could not only compete but often dominate in the paint against players with a significant height advantage. For a guy his size, the things that he could do: rebound the basketball among guys my size, very physical. He was just a competitor. It didn't make a difference who he was going up against. Their head-to-head matchups were titanic struggles. Over 39 games, Barkley's teams held a 21-18 edge, and he personally outproduced Ewing, averaging 25.9 points and 11.9 rebounds, to Ewing's 22.8 points and 10.2 rebounds. This on-court war, however, gave way to a strong off-court friendship. Their bond was cemented during their shared experience as members of the 1992 Dream Team, a recurring theme where the league's fiercest competitors discovered a mutual admiration for one another away from the NBA battlefield. Ewing's respect is a powerful testament to Barkley's pound-for-pound toughness and his relentless will to overcome any physical disadvantage. For Reggie Miller, the introduction to Charles Barkley was immediate and unforgettable. Miller's very first steps onto an NBA court as a professional were for a game on November 6, 1987, at the Spectrum in Philadelphia, facing Barkley's 76ers. For the rookie sharpshooter, his career began by sharing the floor with a player who was already an established superstar and one of the most dominant forces in the game. That initial contest marked the beginning of a long and storied rivalry that would span more than a decade. Years later, after both had transitioned into celebrated careers as television analysts, Miller provided what is perhaps the ultimate testament to Barkley's enduring impact. When asked to compare the legacies of Barkley and 6-time champion Scottie Pippen, Miller made a compelling case for his former rival. He argued that Barkley's total legacy, his on-court dominance combined with his beloved and award-winning post-playing career, was more impressive. Miller referred to Barkley's Emmy Awards as his championships and praised his global appeal, which he argued was earned through his own personality and performance, not just by playing alongside another superstar. Miller also highlighted Barkley's extensive and often unpublicized philanthropic work as a crucial part of his legacy. The respect from these Eastern Conference legends stems from a shared recognition of Barkley as a physical anomaly who defied the conventions of the sport. A 7-footer like Ewing was forced to acknowledge the power of a man half a foot shorter. A master of fundamentals like Bird had to respect the raw, untamable competitiveness. A rookie like Miller was immediately confronted with the league's standard of superstardom. Barkley's initial impact was that of a force of nature. He did not fit the physical prototype for his position, yet he produced at a level that was impossible to deny. This compelled his rivals to respect not just his skill, but his extraordinary will to impose himself on the game, a quality that defined him from his very first day in the league. What made Barkley so special was not just his ability to dominate physically, but his complete refusal to accept limitations. In an era where positions were rigidly defined, where power forwards were expected to be tall and centers were expected to tower over everyone, Barkley rewrote the rules. He didn't have the height, he didn't have the wingspan. What he had was something more powerful. He had an unshakable belief in himself and a motor that never stopped running. Every rebound he grabbed over a taller opponent was a statement. Every bucket he scored in traffic was proof that heart could overcome height. His peers recognized this immediately. They saw a player who refused to be defined by what he wasn't, and instead built a Hall of Fame career on what he was, the most relentless competitor many of them had ever faced. This mindset, this absolute refusal to back down, became the thread that connected every relationship he built with his fellow legends. They respected him not because he fit the mold, but because he shattered it. The peak of Charles Barkley's career arrived in the early 1990s, a period defined by his transformative move to the Phoenix Suns and his iconic, star-making performance as a member of the 1992 U.S. Olympic Dream Team. It was during this time that he not only captured his lone MVP award, but also solidified his status as a beloved global personality and earned the deepest respect of his Western Conference rivals and the game's most revered leaders. Perhaps no legend has offered a more glowing and comprehensive endorsement of Charles Barkley as both a player and a man than Magic Johnson. Though they were fierce rivals in the Western Conference, their time together on the 1992 Dream Team provided Magic with an unfiltered look at Barkley's greatness. In a declaration that still resonates today, Magic asserted that on a roster containing Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and a host of other immortals, it was Barkley who stood tallest. As we trained to get ready to represent the United States, this man was the best player out of all the players, Johnson stated without hesitation. Magic elaborated on this stunning praise, noting that Barkley's dominance was a daily occurrence. He dominated every single night, every single practice, and he was also the most exciting player, he recalled. Coming from the team's captain and one of the game's most respected leaders, this was a monumental tribute to Barkley's performance in what was the single greatest collection of basketball talent ever assembled. Beyond the court, Magic discovered a side of Barkley that the public rarely saw. He spoke with deep admiration for Barkley's character, intelligence, and generosity. What I didn't know about Charles is that he's smarter than what people think. He keeps up on world affairs, but what I really love about him is how he wants to help those less fortunate than himself. He's a special person with a big heart. Magic went on to call him the most giving person I've ever met, painting a complete portrait of a man who was not only a dominant force in basketball, but also a person of immense substance and compassion. The power forward position in the Western Conference during the 1990s was a war zone, and at its epicenter were the brutal, punishing clashes between Charles Barkley and Karl Malone. Their rivalry was a throwback to a more physical era of basketball. Video footage from their matchups shows the intensity of their battles, such as a 1997 game where Malone knocked Barkley to the floor. Rather than retaliating with anger, Barkley got up laughing, walked toward the scorer's table, and winked at the sideline reporter, saying, "I guess I have his attention now, finally." This moment perfectly captured their relationship, a war between the lines, but one fought with a mutual understanding and respect. Despite the physicality, their rivalry was built on a deep, brotherly affection. In a 1993 article he wrote for Sports Illustrated, Malone laid their relationship bare. "I love Charles Barkley like a brother, and except for the times when we're banging and pushing each other under the boards in games between my team, the Utah Jazz, and his, the Phoenix Suns, we're great friends." This friendship was so genuine that Malone felt comfortable publicly disagreeing with Barkley's famous "I am not a role model" Nike campaign, arguing in the same article that Barkley was, in fact, a good one. Years later, Malone would also concede that Barkley was one of only a handful of players from his era who possessed more raw talent than he did, though the mailman prided himself on outworking all of them. Their story is the perfect example of two warriors leaving everything on the court, only to embrace as brothers once the final buzzer sounded. As Karl Malone's cerebral and famously tough-as-nails point guard, John Stockton engaged in his own fierce battles with Barkley. Their most iconic on-court moment came in Game 6 of the 1997 Western Conference Finals. With the game on the line, Stockton received an inbound pass, took one dribble, and launched a series-clinching, buzzer-beating three-pointer directly over the outstretched arm of a closing Barkley, sending the Utah Jazz to their first-ever NBA Finals. It was a moment of triumph for Stockton and heartbreak for Barkley. Yet, the deepest sign of respect from the stoic point guard came not in battle, but in a recruitment effort. As their careers neared their conclusions, Stockton actively tried to persuade Barkley to join the Jazz for one final championship push. His rationale was the ultimate compliment from a player who valued precision and efficiency above all else. Stockton believed Barkley was the missing piece, stating he would have made up for a lot of the mistakes elsewhere on the court. For a floor general as demanding and meticulous as John Stockton, this was the highest possible praise. It was a clear acknowledgement that Barkley's singular talent and force of will could elevate a perennial contender to the status of a champion. The 1992 Dream Team experience proved to be a pivotal turning point in how Barkley was perceived by his elite peers. Before that summer in Barcelona, players like Magic Johnson and Patrick Ewing knew Barkley primarily as a ferocious opponent, a rival to be overcome. The Olympics, however, provided a unique, immersive environment that stripped away the adversarial context of the NBA season. By practicing together, traveling together, and representing their country together, these legends were able to see Barkley in his unfiltered state, his humor, his intelligence, and his undeniable on-court dominance in a collaborative setting. This shared experience acted as a respect accelerator, forging bonds of friendship and mutual admiration that might have otherwise taken years to develop, if at all. It was the moment that transformed Charles Barkley from a mere rival into a confirmed and beloved legend in the eyes of his fellow immortals. Charles Barkley's career was defined by his willingness to confront any challenge, and no challenges were more unique than facing two of the most physically and psychologically imposing forces of his era, Shaquille O'Neal and Dennis Rodman. These relationships were born from intense on-court conflict, yet they evolved into some of Barkley's strongest bonds, showing a recurring theme in his career. Even the most heated confrontations often paved the way for a deeper, more profound respect founded on authenticity. The most visible moment in the history of Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal is their infamous on-court brawl in 1999. After a hard foul, Shaq threw a punch at Barkley, who responded by tackling the 7'1" center to the ground. It was a moment of intense hostility that played on highlight reels for years. However, the true story of their relationship began not with the fight, but with the phone call that immediately followed it. As Shaq later recounted, he was in the locker room when his uncle handed him a phone. On the line were both his mother, Lucille O'Neal, and Barkley's mother, Charcy Glenn. In a twist neither player knew at the time, their mothers had been best friends for 20 years. They proceeded to scold both of their sons like children, with one of them pleading, "Don't you hit my baby." The sheer absurdity of being reprimanded by their mothers after a nationally televised fight caused both Barkley and Shaq to burst out laughing. The tension instantly evaporated and they moved on. That phone call transformed a moment of conflict into the foundation of a lifelong brotherly bond. Today, their chemistry as co-hosts on TNT's Inside the NBA is legendary, and Shaq speaks of Barkley with genuine affection. He's a great guy. He makes me say, man, if I had a big brother, I wish I had a big brother like that. Shaq's deepest respect for Barkley is rooted in his unwavering authenticity. He vividly recalls a time when TNT executives held a meeting to pressure Barkley to stop making his running jokes about the women of San Antonio. Barkley's response was defiant and clear. He told them, "If you don't like what I say, turn the channel. Y'all can fire me today, I'm still gonna get paid. I'm gonna say what I want to say." Witnessing that courage, Shaq's admiration was cemented. I said, I love that guy, that he was real. Facing Dennis Rodman presented a challenge unlike any other in the NBA. Rodman was not only a relentless rebounder and defender, but also a master of psychological warfare, using his antics to frustrate and distract his opponents. To counter this, Barkley developed a strategy that was as direct and physical as his personality. As he later explained, his approach was simple. I'd just punch him as hard as I could in the first 5 minutes, and he'd leave me alone. Barkley explained that Rodman's mind games were only effective against players who allowed themselves to become frustrated. By establishing physical dominance from the opening tip-off, Barkley sent a clear message that he would not be intimidated. This tactic, he claimed, would force Rodman to cut all the antics out and just play. This head-on approach was not born of malice, but of a practical, competitor-to-competitor understanding. It was a form of respect, acknowledging Rodman's unique threat and meeting it with an equally potent response. The respect was mutual. Despite their physical battles, Rodman, in a 1990s interview, named Charles Barkley as one of his toughest competitors encountered. For his part, Barkley has consistently spoken highly of Rodman over the years, both as a player and a person. I like Dennis a lot. I think he is a heck of a player, and I like him as a person. Furthermore, Barkley offered a surprisingly nuanced and positive perspective on Rodman's famously eccentric persona. He viewed it not as mere strangeness, but as a brilliant and calculated business decision. He didn't start making a lot of money until he started dressing up in things like wedding dresses. Nobody paid money to a guy who played defense and rebound, but when he was doing crazy stuff, that's when he became full-blown Dennis Rodman. This analysis shows a deep appreciation not just for Rodman the athlete, but for Rodman the savvy individual who understood how to build a brand. Barkley's ability to form strong, positive relationships with unique personalities like O'Neal and Rodman highlights a core aspect of his character. His own unwavering authenticity acted as a magnet for others who operated outside the league's conventional norms. He approached every interaction, whether a fistfight or a psychological battle, with a raw honesty that others found relatable. He did not judge Rodman's persona. He respected the hustle behind it. He matched Shaq's on-court fire and then laughed about it with him minutes later. In a league that often pressures its stars into polished, corporate-friendly images, Barkley's refusal to be anyone but himself created a foundation of trust. He was a safe harbor for the real ones, and it was this quality that allowed him to turn even the most intense conflicts into lasting friendships. Looking back at the entirety of Barkley's career, a pattern emerges that goes beyond wins and losses. The common thread woven through every rivalry, every friendship, and every confrontation was his uncompromising commitment to being himself. In a world where athletes are coached to say the right thing, to avoid controversy, to protect their brand at all costs, Barkley took the opposite approach. He spoke his mind even when it got him in trouble. He played with emotion even when it cost him technical fouls. He formed genuine connections with people because he never pretended to be something he wasn't. This authenticity became his superpower. It's why his mother's best friend happened to be Shaq's mother. It's why Karl Malone could call him a brother despite their brutal matchups. It's why Magic Johnson saw past the brash exterior to discover a thoughtful, generous man who cared deeply about the world around him. Barkley's legacy isn't complicated. He was real in a world of facades, and his fellow legends loved him for it. What's remarkable about Charles Barkley's journey is how he managed to maintain that authenticity while competing at the highest level. Many players who try to be themselves end up alienating teammates or burning bridges with opponents. But Barkley had a gift. He could trash talk Larry Bird one moment and share a laugh with him the next. He could throw a punch at Shaquille O'Neal and then dissolve into laughter when their mothers called. He could lose to Michael Jordan in the finals and still admit, without shame or bitterness, that Jordan was simply better. This emotional intelligence, this ability to separate competition from character, allowed him to build relationships that transcended the game. His rivals didn't just respect his talent, they respected his humanity. They saw a man who loved the battle but never lost sight of what mattered. Family, friendship, honesty. These weren't just words to Barkley. They were the principles that guided every decision he made, on and off the court. And because he lived by those principles so consistently, his peers didn't just admire him, they loved him. There's also something to be said about how Barkley carried himself in defeat. The 1993 finals loss to Jordan could have broken him. It could have turned him bitter or made him resent the man who stood between him and the only achievement that seemed to matter to the outside world. Instead, Barkley chose a different path. He chose to acknowledge the truth, even when it hurt. He chose to maintain his friendship with Jordan, even though it meant accepting that he would never surpass him. This grace in defeat, this ability to lose with dignity while still maintaining his competitive fire, is perhaps the most underrated aspect of his legacy. His peers saw this. They saw a man who fought like hell to win, but didn't let losing define him. They saw someone who understood that greatness isn't just about championships. It's about how you treat people, how you handle adversity, and whether you stay true to yourself when the world is watching. Barkley passed every one of those tests, and that's why, even without a ring, his peers consider him a champion. The ultimate measure of a player's legacy often comes from the perspective of their rivals, but especially those with whom they shared a contentious history. For Charles Barkley, no relationship was more publicly complex than the one he had with Scottie Pippen. Their brief, tumultuous time as teammates ended in bitterness, yet the passage of time has transformed that conflict into a powerful validation of Barkley's greatness, providing a final, definitive verdict on his place among NBA legends. The Big Three experiment in Houston during the lockout-shortened 1998-99 season, which teamed Barkley with Hakeem Olajuwon and the newly acquired Scottie Pippen, was a disappointment. The aging trio was eliminated in the first round of the playoffs, and the partnership between Barkley and Pippen quickly dissolved into a public war of words. Pippen, frustrated by what he perceived as a lack of dedication from Barkley, openly criticized his teammate. "I probably should have listened to Michael Jordan a year ago when he said that Charles will never win a championship because he doesn't show any dedication. He's a very selfish guy." When Barkley fired back, demanding an apology for Pippen's decision to leave Houston after just one season, Pippen delivered one of the most famous retorts in NBA history. "I wouldn't give Charles Barkley an apology at gunpoint. If anything, he owes me an apology for coming to play with his sorry fat butt." The feud was bitter, personal, and seemed to create an irreparable rift between the two Hall of Famers. However, years later, with their playing careers long behind them, that animosity has evolved into a profound professional respect. In a more recent interview, Pippen was asked a question that has followed Barkley for his entire post-playing career. Is his legacy tainted because he never won an NBA championship? Pippen, a man whose own identity is tied to his 6 championship rings, gave an answer that was both surprising and definitive. In Charles Barkley's situation, I would say no. Pippen's defense of his former rival's legacy is the ultimate testament, carrying the immense weight of his own championship pedigree. He elaborated on his reasoning, painting a picture of a legacy that transcends titles. I would say no, because he won 2 gold medals. He helped globalize basketball all over the world. Everybody knows Charles Barkley because he was a heck of a basketball player, a great player, and he probably deserved to win a title. This powerful validation from Pippen serves as the perfect ending to any discussion of Barkley's career. It shows that over the long arc of history, Barkley's undeniable talent, his global impact, and his magnetic personality were so immense that they overshadowed team failures and even personal disputes. To have a 6-time champion and a 1-time bitter rival argue that your career needs no asterisk is perhaps a greater honor than any ring could give. It is the final verdict delivered by a jury of his peers that Charles Barkley's greatness is and always was undeniable. The collective testimony of these basketball immortals paints a vivid and consistent portrait of Charles Barkley. Their stories, from Michael Jordan's initial, awestruck assessment at the Olympic trials to Scottie Pippen's ultimate validation of his ringless legacy, reveal a truth that statistics alone cannot capture. Barkley was more than just a Hall of Fame player. He was a landmark in the history of the sport. To face him on the court was a rite of passage, a fundamental test of one's physical and mental strength against a man who was a walking paradox of size, skill, and sheer will. The accounts of his peers show that while his outspoken nature and on-court battles were legendary, they were merely the surface of a deeper reality. Beneath the conflict, a powerful current of mutual respect flowed. Magic Johnson saw him as the best player on the greatest team ever assembled. Karl Malone loved him like a brother. Patrick Ewing marveled at his heart. Larry Bird cherished the competition. Even in conflict, as with Shaquille O'Neal, a fight could become the foundation of a lifelong friendship built on authenticity. Ultimately, the stories shared by these legends come together on a single point. Charles Barkley's legacy is not defined by what he lacked, but by the lasting mark he left on everyone he encountered. It is a legacy measured not in championship hardware, but in the universal and enduring respect he commanded from the very greatest to ever play the game. He was and remains an original, a force of nature who bent the game to his will and in doing so earned a permanent place in the hearts and minds of his most revered rivals. Which legend story about Barkley surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you want more stories about the legends of the game, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.